to actually take punitive action against Israel for the massacres that it is committing on a daily basis and has been for a month now against the entire population of Gaza. I have to say, I find it shocking in the extreme that even this morning we are listening to the Israeli ambassador justifying the mass slaughter of Palestinians in Gaza, claiming that they are acting within the confines of international law, when it is blatantly happening in front of the eyes of the world that they are committing indiscriminate massacres of Palestinians, claiming so far in excess of 10,000 lives, including the lives of more than 4,000 children. And yet we hear descriptions of a massacre by Hamas on October the 7th, but no reference to the massacres that Israel is committing in front of the eyes of the world, and which it continues to justify and has clearly spelt out it intends to continue for an indefinite period. So we believe the international community, who are refusing to act against this, including our government, have not a shred of moral credibility unless they impose sanctions on Israel for what are almost certainly war crimes, crimes against humanity, and very likely the crime of genocide being committed against the people of Gaza. And that means at the very minimum, the Irish government should expel the Israeli ambassador for continuing to justify the massacre of thousands of Palestinians on an ongoing daily basis, to close down the Israeli embassy in this country, to impose other sanctions on Israel for the crimes that it is committing, and we are calling on them to either take a case themselves or join cases that are being taken by, for example, the Spanish social welfare minister. We attended a meeting, myself and Paul attended a meeting with the Minister for Social Welfare in Spain on Zoom with MEPs and members of Parliament from a number of different countries across Europe, and there's a petition being submitted to take a case against Israel for the commission of war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. We believe the Irish government should either take its own case along those lines or join that action, which we will certainly be supporting, and indeed we will be asking others in the Dáil, government and opposition, to support our call to expel the Israeli ambassador and to refer Israel to the International Criminal Court for war crimes, crimes against humanity, and for genocide. We hope that by calling for those things, we can prompt either the government to allow time and to put forward a motion to that effect, or to prompt others in the opposition to use their private members' time to put forward such a motion. If that doesn't happen, People Before Profit have private members' time on the 22nd of November. We've already drafted the motion, which will be circulating to other parties later today, and we are committing now that if others have not already done so, on November the 22nd, we will put forward that motion calling for the expulsion of the ambassador and calling for Israel to be referred to the International Criminal Court for war crimes.
Richard, on Saturday, the Taoiseach Micheál Martin said it would make it difficult or impossible to get Irish people out of Gaza if we expelled the Israeli ambassador, because his opposite number would then have to leave Israel. What do you say to that?
No, it's Israel's bombing of Gaza and their refusal to let people out that is the obstacle to people being able to exit Gaza, and indeed for hostages to be freed. It's Israel's massacre that is taking place, its refusal to even go along with a ceasefire, and its refusal to let people in or out in any significant numbers out of the territory that they are bombarding on a savage basis. That's the problem. And it's clear that taking a sort of diplomatic or polite approach with Israel has yielded absolutely nothing. So now we need punitive sanctions to be imposed on Israel to put pressure on it to end this massacre that is taking place in Gaza and to allow people... Pardon?
What type of sanctions do you think?
Well, in the first instance, the expulsion of the ambassador and the closing down of the embassy. Our personal view is that there should be a full boycott, sanctions, comprehensive sanctions and divestment from Israel, similar to the campaign of boycott and sanctions that was imposed on apartheid South Africa. We believe, in fact, the crimes that Israel are committing on an ongoing basis, not just in Gaza over the last month, but for years now, merit sanctions of that sort in order to end their impunity and hold them accountable for the ongoing crimes of ethnic cleansing, of illegal occupation, for the seizure of Palestinian land, for the killing of Palestinians on a regular basis, and for the siege of Gaza itself, a collective punishment of 2.2 million people that has been going on for 16 years and which is the real cause of the current escalation of violence.
Expel the Israeli ambassador, would we not also have to expel the Russian ambassador, because otherwise we could be deemed that we're treating two separate countries at war differently?
Oh, I think that the difference here is that we are dealing not with a normal state of any description. I mean, Putin's invasion of Ukraine is despicable. It is an indefensible, aggressive military action, on a par with the US invasion of Iraq in 2003, which we opposed, just as we opposed Putin's invasion. But we didn't call for sanctions against the United States in 2003 because we understood that murderous invasion was a policy decision of a particular government. So we didn't believe it was appropriate to impose sanctions on all of the American people, and we would have a similar view with Russia. The difference with Israel, like apartheid South Africa, is the state itself is built on policies of ethnic cleansing and of apartheid and of racism. So it's not what the horrors that are being inflicted and the crimes that are being inflicted on Palestinians are not the result of this or that government. They are actually written into the structures of the Israeli state, just as they were in apartheid South Africa, and the world needs to recognise that the barbarism we are witnessing now is a outworking of the internal logic of a state that is built on ethnic cleansing, apartheid and racism.
Richard, Neil Martin says that Ireland unilaterally imposing sanctions would be ineffective, and that Ireland doesn't control trade with Israel anyway. It's a new competency. So how do you respond to those kinds of points?
Yeah, well, it relates to the question that Aoife raised earlier about the Irish citizens in Gaza, right? So Micheál Martin's argument is that we shouldn't expel the ambassador, stop diplomatic links with Israel, because that would hinder returning Irish citizens from Gaza. But we should be clear that what is happening right now with diplomatic links is that Israel is holding Irish citizens hostage in Gaza. Israel is refusing to allow Irish citizens and Brazilian citizens to leave Gaza in what very much appears to be retaliation for a vote at the UN. If you look at those countries whose citizens are allowed to use, they're those countries that voted with Israel against a ceasefire or abstained, and for Ireland and Brazil, who voted in favour of a ceasefire, we are being punished. So already this idea of treating Israel nicely is not working, and Irish citizens are being punished for the words of criticism that the Irish government has made. But actually what can have an impact is that there's a rising movement across the world to isolate Israel. So Colombia have broken all diplomatic links with Israel, have expelled the ambassador. Chile and Bolivia have withdrawn their diplomats from Israel. This morning it's reported that South Africa have withdrawn their diplomats from Israel. The Podemos, which is in the Spanish government in Spain, is calling for the government in Spain to expel their Israeli ambassador. We think it actually would have a big impact on the world stage if a European country was to take this step and to say we're going to expel the Israeli ambassador. That's why we welcome the change of position of Sinn Féin. It's why, as Richard said, we're putting forward a motion which we're open to be a joint motion of all opposition parties who support this demand, and we're very serious about building pressure to get this passed and to get an Israeli ambassador expelled, because we think it would have an impact. We're not saying in and of itself that'll stop Israel bombing, but it is a very significant action that can be taken by the state to isolate Israel, to send a signal to Palestinians, to send a signal to people around the world on whose side we are on, and to put pressure on the Israeli government. So we are very, very anxious to get that debated and voted in the Dáil as quickly as is possible. We're going to be discussing with the two opposition parties that have private members' time next week, Sinn Féin and the Social Democrats, to see if they would use their time next week. But if not, we're saying certainly that as People Before Profit Solidarity, we think we would use that time in the following week, that there would be a vote and also a big mobilisation outside the Dáil. There are two things quickly on Palestine to say. Is we're going to be asking serious questions. There was an occupation yesterday of the Department of Transport about whether Israeli goods, whether arms for Israel are being transported through Shannon Airport. We want to get absolute assurance from the government that everything is being inspected. We're obviously opposed to the use of Shannon Airport by the US military, full stop. But we want to be assured that the Irish government is taking this seriously and making sure that no military goods are passing through Ireland. And the other thing to emphasise is people will have seen massive protests around the world. There is now a national protest being called by the IPSC for the 18th, so Saturday week. We think this can be an occasion when literally tens and tens of thousands of people can be on the streets in Dublin. We're going to be all out with others to build that protest as big as is possible, because I think that can maximise the pressure on the government to expel the ambassador. Final thing is just about apartment defects. This is really a disaster. It's over a year now since the Irish government has a report talking about the scale of the problem, over 100,000 apartments affected, an average cost of €25,000, and saying we're going to have a full redress scheme. So that's what they promised, but nothing has come with that. Two budgets have passed with no money allocated. I mean, €70 million allocated in this budget, when they have agreed two schemes between MICA and apartment duplex redress that are worth over €5 billion combined, and they've allocated €70 million. There's no indication of the heads of bill, and there's every chance now that this government is simply going to have promised we're going to have redress, but then not actually implement the legislation to allow it to happen before there's an election, and then kick it off to the next government, which means that the promise is absolutely worthless. So the campaign, the Not Our Fault campaign, is upping its pressure on the government. There's a very important protest outside the Fianna Fáil Ardèche on Saturday, and there's going to be a series of events over the coming months to put pressure on the government to actually move, both in terms of emergency funding before Christmas and in terms of moving on the heads of bill for the full redress scheme.
So I want to make 2 points. The first point is on the issue of the serious allegations of racism in the Cork University Hospital that has been headlined this morning in the Irish Independent. I take these allegations very seriously. I think, the health services in this country wouldn't survive for 48 hours if it weren't for the skill, the dedication of nurses and other hospital staff who've come here from abroad. They deserve to be treated with the utmost courtesy and respect right along the line. And these allegations are shocking. I've sought a meeting now with Migrant Nurses Ireland, a non-profit organisation which assists nurses from other nations who come to work in our health service. They are backing the workers who've taken the case to the WRC, and I've sought a meeting with them to find out more and to discuss the issues further. And I also am requesting of the Count Coirla that a topical issues discussion on this issue be allowed for this evening. I think the issues are of sufficient importance to merit that. Just briefly in relation to Palestine, I note the fact that hundreds of academics in Irish universities have written to the universities asking that links with Israel and Israeli universities be severed. And I think that any employee, any worker who works for a company which has links, connections, does business with the Israeli state, with business in the Israeli state, needs to have a discussion. While the strangling of Gaza and threatened genocide of the Palestinian population is taking place, need to have a discussion about what you can do. What can they do? What can you do in your workplace in relation to this? We have the example from the 1980s of the Dunn Stores workers who refused to handle apartheid South African fruit. People who are employed in companies such as this need to discuss, it's not business as usual, what can be done as we watch a genocide unfold before our eyes on the TV screens. And the trade union movement need to step up to the mark and provide support and backing for any worker or group of workers who consider action on that front. Just to say as well, what a disgrace to see the Israeli ambassador, representative of a state which is threatening genocide against the people, in attendance at the Fianna Fáil Ardèche at the weekend. I think we have seen words from the Taoiseach, the Taoiseach and the government which are stronger than the words being uttered by the leaders of other governments throughout Europe, but words are not enough at this stage. This is a time for action, and it's clear that the most immediate, decisive and effective action that can be taken is to expel the Israeli ambassador and to close that embassy. Okay?
Richard, can I finally ask how, since you've spent time in Palestine, have you been in contact with any of those you met and you were over there since this began, and how are they getting on?
I'm in regular contact with people in Palestine and in Gaza, and I mean, there's simply no words to describe the horror and the fear and the trauma that people are going through. It's absolutely horrific. And I mean, I find it hard to understand how the Israeli ambassador or representatives of the Israeli government can appear on the Irish media and be taken in any way seriously when they are claiming that they're acting within the parameters of international law, when we're witnessing in front of our eyes massacres. Thousands of men, women and children being slaughtered in front of our eyes. I mean, the evidence is manifold. And we have public statements and declarations from ministers and generals and the president of Israel making it clear they are collectively punishing the entire population. So we have a stated intent by senior political and military figures in Israel to commit war crimes, and then those war crimes are being committed in front of our eyes, and yet we have their spokespeople claiming they're acting within the parameters of international law. I mean, it's Orwellian. It's truly Orwellian. So I am very, very scared for the many people I know in Gaza and in Palestine. And actually, if I might just say a word, which I hadn't thought of earlier, is quite important. One of the groups of people I've been talking to quite a lot over the last few days are Palestinians who live within Israel, who are also suffering a vicious campaign of repression at the moment. These are people who have Israeli citizenship, but they are being sacked, they are being arrested, they are being imprisoned if they even put up social media posts expressing condolences for the deaths of people being killed in Gaza. That is the level of repression. So when Leo Varadkar said to me, was it last week or the week before, when he referred to Israel being a democracy, Israel is not a democracy if you dare to say a off. That's what Gallant said. All restrictions taken off, and we can see the bloody, terrible, murderous consequences in front of our eyes.